Hey there, EB here with the Good Skill Podcast, where we talk with really interesting guests who bet on themselves their entire life, use their skills and superpowers to be successful. They don't wait for luck, they go and they get it. Come and join us. Hey there, EB here with the Good Skill Podcast, where we bet on ourselves and we talk with leaders in their respective industries, people who are highly respected in their endeavors, people who do not bet on luck. They use their life experiences, their education, and their own confidence to bet on themselves to get ahead. And today, I am so honored to have one of my closest friends, but somebody who I admire, somebody who I respect, somebody who earned the respect of the world at the Alex Murdaugh murder trial in March of 2023, who literally came out of nowhere to hit the grand slam in the World Series. And the world got to know Dr. Kinsey at that trial, but there's a lot of us in the legal community who knew of Dr. Kinsey, but this is a man who is highly educated, highly skilled, with a breadth and world of experience, who just underestimate him and see what you get. We have that similar quality in that people, we love it when we're underestimated and we could sneak up on you. Dr. Kinsey is someone who has an impressive background of one of South Carolina's top forensic experts, a professor, a community leader. Dr. Kinsey has dedicated his life to the pursuit of justice and law enforcement through meticulous forensic analysis and investigation. He's had over 30 years of experience being a chief deputy through the Sheriff Office of Orangeburg. He's not only solved complex criminal cases, but also has made a profound impact as an educator, teaching law enforcement officers, attorneys, and students across the country. Dr. Kinsey's expertise has been called upon in some of the most high-profile cases in recent memory, including the several earth-shattering moments in the Alex Murdaugh trial. And I can safely say that I was there for most of the trial. I watched every day of it, and the most compelling witness in the trial, whether for the state or the defense, and this includes Alex Murdaugh himself testifying, was Dr. Kinsey's testimony. His commitment to integrity and precision is unparalleled, and today we dive into his journey, insights, and the pivotal role in forensic science, how it plays in the justice system. Welcome, Dr. Kinsey.
Thank you. Thank you.
I think your testimony in the Murdaugh trial was not only persuasive, but it really broke it down, the shooting at Mizell, in a way that everybody could digest it, understand it, and visualize it. And I think your magic or your secret sauce is how you have an ability to communicate. And that's something that comes natural. It's not forced. When talking to you, I feel like I'm talking to a friend. You're not trying to get one over on me. You have a belief and you advocate for your beliefs, but you have an ability not to demean the other side when you're expressing your opinions. But most importantly, you have a tremendous self-deprecating humor, which I think disarms you in a way that people can then listen to your testimony because, again, you're underestimated. So where did this come from? Were you the kid that was beat on, or were you the bully like me when you were younger?
EB, I gotta say it's a little tough to utilize my weapons, especially when you're doing battle against a dear friend and what I'm talking about there. But I was a kid that I would stand up for the underdog constantly, but if I lost, I would want to fight every child on the playground. I hated marbles. If I lost, somebody was going to wear a butt kicking, sometimes me, but I was going to push it as far as I could push it. But more times than not, I would stand up for that little guy or that little girl that was being bullied. So I guess a little bit on both sides of that spectrum.
When you were growing up,
Did you always want to be a law enforcement officer? What drew you to it? Was it by design or by happenstance?
Well, my dad was a career firefighter, and with the push to go public safety, he crossed over. And then my mother, who got in the career a little bit later, was also a police officer in Hampton, by the way, and lost her a couple years back, but she was still active when the Murdaugh case took off. And she and I never spoke about it. That's the funny thing, but I didn't have a choice. Grandfather, long decorated military career, always as a grunt. He never climbed to officer status, always NCO, and just never afraid to jump in and do the hard work, whether it's twisting a wrench on a outboard motor or, framing or building my upstairs. You just got to find a way to do it on your own. And I never had a choice. It was either one or the other. I don't have a lot of gray area. So I wouldn't have made a real good Hell's Angel. So I kind of had to pick the right side. I really wasn't given a choice.
Well, what does public service mean to you, and why was it important that you spend your life serving others and serving the public?
I truly believe we all have a duty, no matter what your goals are, to try and make it better. This rock we live on is only so big. It's only going to be here so long. And I truly believe that if you can, it doesn't mean you have to necessarily believe what others believe, but I still believe that we have a duty to try and make each other as comfortable as possible if it's in our means, especially if it doesn't cost us anything. And I'm not talking about monetarily, but it doesn't cost us anything but effort to just pick somebody up rather than throw them down.
So what drew you to this kind of puzzle of solving crimes? What is it about it that gets your juices flowing? And do you have to have a certain mindset or creativity to deconstruct a crime scene?
I do, Eric, and I'll tell you, it is 180 degrees from where I started. When I started carrying a badge and a gun, Sonny Crockett was the big deal. Don Johnson, the original Don Johnson,
Miami Vice.
Yeah, everyone that gets in law enforcement back then wanted the job where you could wear the blue jeans and the shirt untucked, do narcotics and undercover. And I'll be the first to tell you, I was terrible at it. That was my first stint. It's really hard in my area for a flower white guy to go out and buy dope. So you were always on the side of the takedown team. And I can hold my own, I always have, but I had this idea of 30 years of kicking down doors and climbing out of windows and rappelling, and it was just too much. And you get to a point in time where you have to make that decision. And with me, it happened by accident. We had an elderly lady who had passed away of natural causes. And my entire shift ended up, because it was a quiet night, everyone ended up here. And I'm telling you, not to get any details, it was bad. It was just really bad. And I don't know if I should say this, but I'm going to say it. I'm the only one that didn't get sick. So we're all outside this house, and the sheriff at the time, I worked for 4 sheriffs, and the sheriff at the time pulled up, and everyone's over in the azalea bushes losing their dinner.
Their lunch.
Yes. And I'm sitting here going, man, this is bad. And he looks at me and he says, you're going to CSI school. And I wouldn't turn down a school if it was Crossing Guard 101. I always believed you must be as educated as possible. So I said, okay. And I went to SLED. That was my first school. I went and did an internship at SLED. And nearing the end of that internship, you actually sleep at the academy and you roll with them guys when they go out. And near the end of that internship, Tom Darnell, I don't know if you're familiar, but his dad's a famous sheriff, Ed Darnell from Bamberg County. Tom come to me and Tom said, you want to go to fingerprint school? And I'm like, man, my agency's not going to let me stay up here. I've been here like 3 or 4 weeks, maybe 5 weeks. He said, nope, done made the call, you're going. So I didn't even move out of my dorm room at the academy and at fingerprint school and then camera school and then ID tech school. And I was gone for about 6 months, EB. Yeah, I'd come home on Friday to sign my timesheet just so I got paid and be with my family until Sunday. And then it was back to the academy. And as soon as I got finished, SLED offered me a job. And I was right up to the point of taking, because I was just an investigator at my agency at this point in time. And I was just about at the point of taking the job at SLED for chief steward, and the state put a freeze on hiring. So I went back, and my agency's like, to keep from losing you, we're going to let you work crime scenes. We're not going to make you work regular detective work anymore. And it evolved. And then 2 or 3 years later, I ended up going to SLED and just meeting so many sheriffs and police chiefs and coroners throughout the state, running all 46 counties. It was amazing. And you're always getting schools. You're always getting the opportunity to learn. And I took it from there, and it is just grown.
Yeah. What really impresses me about you, Kenny, is the amount of classes you've taken and your certifications that you have. I see your diplomas up on the wall, but that's just diplomas. It's the extra work that you've done, whether it's footprinting, whether it's weather, everything that mixes into that crime scene investigation. And, it's not sexy. It's laborious. It's tedious. Talking about a crime scene is somewhat scientific, like you're in the lab. You determine whether there's fingerprints, and if you see blood, okay, let's start testing that. Bullets, you reverse the trajectory of the bullets. You figure out how somebody came in, where the victim was, and everything. And it's a lot of mathematics. It's a lot of science. It's a lot of understanding weather, temperature, dew points, everything that goes into a crime scene. And it's clearly an art in a way. Yes, there's science in it, but every crime scene can be criticized. Every crime scene can be pulled apart. You could do 1,300 things in a crime scene, but I'll be able to put you on the stand and cross-examine you and say, well, why didn't you do this? And then as a lawyer or a prosecutor, somebody stands up and says, he didn't focus on those 2 things. He wasted his time on the other 1,300. And then if I focus you on the 2 things, I'd say, well, he didn't do the other 1,300 things. So how do you look at a crime? What do you do when you walk on a crime scene? Do you put yourself in the assailant's viewpoint or the victim's viewpoint, or both?
I like to work. Most investigators go straight to the body or straight to the body of evidence. I like to start on the outside and work in. It's just been the way I was taught. It's worked for me, because the number one thing that destroys evidence at a crime scene, the spoliation of evidence, is law enforcement and emergency first responders.
Right.
It's the number one thing. So if I can limit...
That's what Harpootlian was trying to point to throughout the entire Murdaugh trial, was people were stepping over Paul's body. They were stepping in potentially blood. There were car tire tracks that could have been examined, but all the first responder vehicles came and drove over it. People were in the house. So in the Murdaugh trial, we're going to spend a good bit of time on it. That was the focus, that, the law enforcement destroyed the integrity of the crime scene.
And you have it in every scene. You've seen me testify a number of times now. I've never got in my vehicle and left a crime scene and said, man, I did everything right. Pat myself on the back. You always make mistakes. And that's part of the learning process. You try not to make those mistakes again. And then the next crime scene, you're going to make another mistake.
So when you're running that crime scene and you see people converging on the scene, whether it's EMS, if it's fire, if it's your jurisdiction, maybe SLED comes in, I know you're strong enough, but are you respected enough that when you say, hey guys, back off, put your boot covers on, or I don't want you to walk here, do you get pushback, or how does it work? Because some people may disregard what you say.
It works both ways, but I come up with a technique, and I believe I am the one that invented this technique. I don't take credit for a lot, but it happened at a large agency, and you're exactly correct. You can't tell a sheriff of a 600-man department, get out of my scene, because it's not your scene. You're there assisting. And so what I come up with, you get your crime scene log, and on your log, you got name, agency, and our logs were a little bit different. It had race, sex, shoe size, and shoe type. And so what I would do is I'd say, Sheriff Bland, this is certainly your sandbox, and I appreciate you letting me play in it, but I'm going to need to take your shoes. And they're like, what? Well, yeah, I need to take your shoes. We've got unidentified footwear impressions. So you're going to get them back in 6 or 8 weeks after I can get them processed, but I have to take your shoes or your boots because now they're part of the crime scene. And generally speaking, it works 99% of the time. You will not see them anymore. You will not see them anymore.
So how do you get better at it? Is it intuitively you see things and then you see the connection? Have you ever made mistakes and drew conclusions too quickly?
I have spoiled evidence. I have caused a small fire in the laboratory, processing evidence. I had a narcotics bag that is, just your typical dime bag, little plastic baggie. And some agencies want, like I said, the sun and the moon. Whitney and I were speaking about that earlier. And they wanted latent impressions on this narcotics bag, the size of a postage stamp. You can't tell them no. That was Chief Stewart's number one rule. You're going to try. So while I was sitting here prepping my material, the ventilation hood sucked it up. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to get fired over the plastic from around a dime bag, of marijuana. So Comrade and I, we went to the 4th floor of the old forensics building and just to look. Maybe it got hung up in the ventilation, and it's hanging through the vent cover on the outside of the building. And so my buddy, I'll go ahead and throw his name out here, Al Stuckey. He's a big guy. He's a power lifter, real good friend. We come up with the plan that he was going to hold on to me and I was going to climb out. And I actually, with a pair of tweezers, I retrieved the evidence. I've sneezed on a box of evidence before we were aware of the sensitivity of touch DNA and before it got to where it's at now. Definitely, I've left fingerprints. You get in the lab and you start working all of your latents, and it's really hard to tell which side of the tape, and you may have touched it. Sometimes even with gloves. If you wear a pair of latex gloves 2 or 3 hours on a scene, you start sweating inside and you actually can leave a latent with the gloves sometimes. I've done that. Certainly, I've forgotten evidence. I've driven I didn't do it. This is my late partner's fault, but he put a box of evidence on the tailgate of the vehicle and we drove off, and when we got to the stop sign, we heard calamity and the evidence is rolling down the street.
From the Murdaugh case, Kenny, the big thing was there was going to be blood splatter on the T-shirt. And then when the T-shirt was sent off to be tested by SLED, it got that purple liquid and it looked like a tie-dye shirt when it came back. And Harpoon made a huge, deal about it in a press conference that was, the contaminated evidence that was exonerating to Alex Murdaugh. And the brilliance of the prosecution, they never even used it. It never was. They proved the crime through other means, through the trajectory of bullets, and obviously through the GPS on Alex's Suburban, and they phone mapped and all that highly technical stuff. But originally it was going to be proven by, he had a little blood splatter on it. And so have you ever been in a situation where chemicals destroyed the integrity of the evidence?
Yes, sir. Other than that one, I was originally contracted for that case to examine that shirt. And when I came back, I said, y'all, I don't have a dime in this dollar and I'm the lowest person here. But my advice is, Creighton, put that shirt away and don't use it. And I hope, I think that had something to do with him and the higher ups ultimately deciding that, and with the same chemical.
Oh, I think so. I think you had a profound effect on them.
Else, if you look back at my report that the other side didn't want anyone to see, so they released it in a motion worldwide. If you look in my report, I addressed the shirt And I said, I'll go to the lab and let me look at it with my own eyes, because these photographs are not proper for me to go out on a limb and make a call. And that chemical, leucocrystal violet, is used by, I'd probably be safe to say, every crime scene unit, that exists, but it is peroxide based. And just like when you pour peroxide on a cut or a scrape, it foams up. So it's going to distort any type of detail if you're comparing a known to an unknown. And it wouldn't be my choice of chemicals. We never used it for that purpose, but you've got to have that knowledge to know that immediately when I spray this substance on this potential evidence, it's going to foam up. So there are things you can do. If I'm looking at a footwear, for instance, I can rinse it with deionized water, and that'll push that foam out, but you'll still get that color contrast. And it's just things you learn over time. I have done that with evidence. I don't believe it was a death scene, but I have processed stolen vehicles and that kind of thing with LCV, where they would wreck the vehicle and you knew there was some blood loss and jump out and run. And you spray it and you're getting late in the afternoon. You said, I'll come back in the morning.
Right.
Or you come back tomorrow morning and you got that tie-dye that you mentioned, everything's purple, and you say, oh, note to self, let's don't do this again. And it's constant. If you think you're perfect and you work crime scene, you are definitely in the wrong business, because just the nature of the evidence itself, you're going to make mistakes.
I mean, a typical murder crime scene will probably have at least 400 different things that you're going to look at, that you're going to maybe measure, that you're going to have to think about. And what impresses me most about you as an expert witness is your objectivity. I think the hallmark of an expert is being objective, not advocating for one side or the other, not having enemies to punish and friends to reward. And you tell it straight like it is. Like, you're not going to shape the facts, and you're going to tell the lawyer or the party you're working for, hey, look, I can't give you the opinion that you want because of this, or I can't give you the opinion on this, but let me take you over here. Like in our case where you're on the other side of me, you looked at stop signs that had bullet holes in it instead of really focusing on, and it was a gun range case where the bullets are coming from the gun range. You said, well, look at all these other shooters over here. This is another possibility of where these bullets are coming from. And I think objectivity as an expert is your calling card, because if you get to the point where you become an advocate and no longer an objective expert, you're worthless to, I think, a case. I mean, and honesty is always the best calling card, but especially in your craft. Don't you agree?
I do. And could I tell you, and you may want to edit this out, but I just testified in a murder case in my hometown. I have testified. The majority of my testimonies have been here in Orangeburg, probably more than half. And I was working for the defense. It was a serious shooting reconstruction. Someone lost their life. And I told the prosecutor, came to me and said, I need to talk to you about it. I said, well, that's not proper. I said, let me talk with my client first. If she says it's okay, then certainly I'm never going to tell a prosecutor or the other side no. And so she said, sure, talk with them. And I explained to them elevation. We're talking about a 4-foot elevation. And we actually had this on video. The shooter is on video. Level arm, shooting straight. So your victim is 4 foot or more lower than the shooter. And then there's someone at the bottom of the hill shooting back up. And you got an entry wound here and an exit wound in the top, almost in the top of the crown of the head. I'm like, it doesn't work that way. Your shooter at the bottom of the hill is the one through and through, no ballistics. I said, your shooter at the bottom is the one responsible for this man's death, at least the bullet. And the prosecutor had a chance to change his strategy because I talked with him with permission from my client, and they went hand of one, hand of all, and they secured a conviction.
So what that means for our listeners, hand of one, hand of all, is it's a conspiracy for murder. you don't have to pull the trigger, but you are part of the overall act. So the hand of one shooting the gun becomes the hand of all who are part of the plan.
Exactly. And my client is a very skilled attorney. She fights every day for her clients. And I told her, I said, as soon as the judge approved that charge, I said, you're against the wall. There's nothing you can do now as the best attorney for this young man. There's nothing you can do. It's a done deal. And I was correct. But sometimes that objectivity, you don't want to tell the other side, no, I won't. And in Georgia, you actually are expected to speak with the prosecutor if they contact you. So I've worked several cases, both criminal and civil, in Georgia. And I just like it being out there. And it backfired on me, EB. I went in the closing because the state got 2 closings. They were as complimentary of myself as you are, always. And in the second one, I was such and such an hour paid gun that come in here to muddy the water. And I'm thinking next time it's going to be a whole lot different when I testify here, because I will not talk with you next time.
Well, one of the persuasive things was in the Murdaugh case, and we're going to gravitate right now towards it, was when you said, I'm really not getting paid. I've been paid maybe $1,000 so far, or $3,000. You got Harpootlian over here whining about his expert witnesses that he's paying $750 and $1,000 an hour. And he wanted him to get up on the witness stand on a Friday so he didn't have to pay him to stay over the weekend. And here comes Kinsey walking in saying, I'm not even really getting paid for this, which was just so impactful, because the first thing I say when I cross-examine an expert witness is, how many times you testified for the defense or the plaintiff, and you're here, you're getting paid $750 an hour. How much have you billed to date? And you could see the jury start to do the math and say, wow, this guy's getting paid about $30,000. But as far as the Murdaugh case, I think our paths to how we got there are very similar. I write about it in my book, and I'm so grateful that you gave a review for my book because it's so meaningful. But I think my whole career set me at a point in my life that I was going to get involved in the Murdaugh case. I remember saying to my partner, Ronnie, I don't know how, I don't know when, but we're going to get to be a part of this case. And I said it probably maybe in July, a month after the murders in June of 2021. And he's like, come on, no way. And that was before the Labor Day discovery of the firm discovering that he was stealing all the money. But I just felt like, hey, we were going to get involved. And I kind of look at you the same way, like your destiny was meant for the Murdaugh case. That was your coming out party. Yes, you did a lot of local expert witness stuff, but you became the new Cyril Wecht, Dr. Cyril Wecht, or Henry Lee, the new forensic guy that's going to be pulled in every major case. Did you feel like when the murder happened, I think I'm going to end up getting involved, or how did you get involved in the Murdaugh case?
Well, I did try to get involved immediately, but not for self-reward. I supervised a really good crime scene unit in Orangeburg, and I knew that SLED had a shortage. And I called my friend Ryan Neal immediately. I said, look, we're only 45 minutes away. If you need anything, please let me.
Smart.
And I didn't mean for me. I meant to tell my guys, go down there and help SLED. And he called me back several hours later. And he said, I may need you. And I'm like, you need me? He said, yeah. He said, we need you to look at some blood spatter and I'll call you back. Well, that call didn't come for almost a year and a half. So I had really forgotten about it, and then it happened. And like, I do truly believe it's destiny. Like you just mentioned, didn't know what capacity, but I knew it would be something.
But you migrated from blood splatter to bullet trajectory, to positions of bodies. I mean, you became, the catch-all almost to the sine qua non. Without you, it couldn't have happened. Expert witness. And, a lot of it was the defense putting on Petticoat Junction type of Green Acre witnesses. The coroner that said, I'm going to be able to tell you the time of death because I could put my hand under his armpit and feel. I mean, come on. I mean, this is 2021. Okay. We're not back in 1910. And then the guy who was the expert for all, he was originally an engineering reconstruction for automobile accidents, who then became the one who said, well, the shooter was 4'1", which enabled you to, in your kind of self-deprecating, calm way, without blowing your trumpet, you blew the guy out of the water with just your homily country charm. And I believe from the start that Alex did this, but I had an open mind. But the more I dug into it, I have never been as certain that Alex was at that crime scene and he discharged those weapons. There's just too many facts that a guilty man gave himself away, almost like Dostoevsky, Crime and Punishment. I mean, you don't call your son as soon as your wife and your other son are dead. You call friends first. You loo in interset shirts. You have totally clean clothes on. Look, if Kenny Kinsey, my friend, is shot and I come up on you, I'm going to be hugging the life in you. I'm going to have blood all over me, dirt, everything. I'm not going to have clean clothes. I mean, there's just so much. And I'm not going to lie to my only living child that for 2 years, I was there the last second that your mother and your brother got killed. And I'm not going to tell you that. I'm going to tell you a lie that I was actually up at the house instead of the kennels. And I am convinced, and I can say it, even if he ends up with a new trial, even if they limit the amount of financial information from all his financial thefts, and that was a motive for murder, even though you don't have to show motive for the murder, even if they exclude all that evidence, I believe the forensic evidence will still convict him on a new trial. And even if somehow he gets a new trial and he gets a not guilty, I believe Alex Murdaugh is guilty. And I'm going to ask you, do you believe Alex Murdaugh is guilty of the murders of his wife and his son?
Yes, sir, I do now. And you hit on it just now. And look, I'm not saying that someone who is a parent, I definitely don't want to say someone who is a parent is more or less than someone who is not a parent. So it's not about that. But you just hit on it. The parent thing. A parent, you're going to walk through the desert barefoot for your children. And especially for your surviving child. That did it for me. And Eric, it took me a little while to even cross that bridge.
And what you're referring to, Kenny, is when he calls Buster, if he really believed that these killers were out on the loose and these killers were coming to kill his family, and let's put aside the fact that if somebody's coming to execute you, they're coming with their own weapons. They're not coming to a rural area in South Carolina in the dark of night with no weapons. And the plan's going to be, I'm going to break into the house knowing that you have weapons there and steal your weapons and kill you with it. When you walk on a property in the South at night, you could be shot. Okay. So
yes,
let's put all that aside. If you believe there's these killers out there, when you call your son, you're not going to ask your son to come home. You're going to tell your son, you get your butt to the local police station right now.
Immediately.
Wait, because there's people that are trying to kill our family.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. That did it. That did it for me. And I was fortunate enough to actually hear the testimony, and that did it for me. I was done. We were still waiting on the jury. I said, I'm not going to say anything. And I think it was probably August at CrimeCon before anyone ever asked me, what do you think? And I said, I'm allowed to have an opinion. I didn't rely on my opinion during any of my work. And I believe 100% Alex Murdaugh is responsible for this. And I also feel for his surviving child. I can't imagine. And I do believe that about you, EB. I believe that if you were twisted, it can't happen that way. But if you were twisted and you were in his position, I truly believe you'd tell your other child.
And there's no question about it.
Yeah, I
And
mean, I truly believe that. I think I would also, I know I would also, but that did it for me. When you're not, you think there's a family of hitmen out here taking out Kinseys, and I've got one surviving child. Get to a police department, get there now. Don't ask me any questions. I'll call you back. And that didn't happen.
and who puts a reward out that expires 90 days from now? I
And
mean,
put a deadline. Yes,
if you
sir.
want to find the killer, it's an open-ended reward. And
Yes.
oh, by the way, if two people commit a crime, nobody can keep it secret. Okay. And somebody would have sold some information to law enforcement over the past 4 years to say, hey, I know who did this. It's just all of it is inconceivable to me. But I think the most powerful testimony you gave at the trial it made me nauseous was when you said the reason that his brain was shot out of his head was Alex shot Paul thinking that he had killed Paul. And then when he looked up and he was down on the ground, Paul comes out from the closet shot. And Alex is so shocked. Like, how is this kid living? I just shot him close up with a shotgun. And that was the upward shot, which unfortunately, dislodged the brains from his head. That shows the depravity of that man. And I don't know whether he killed Paul because, look, Paul was going to get 10 years for that boating accident. He was going to get serious time for killing Mallory. And whether he thought that, because Paul was a hothead at 5'7", he wasn't going to survive in prison, or he was really mad that Paul ruined his idyllic life that he had. This, I can steal. I'm this big person. I have these big personal injury case. It's a pot of gold every time I have a $5 million settlement. I give the client some money. I get to take my own. And Paul blew it. He blew that all wide open with that stupid activity of driving drunk in the boating accident and his behavior. And so I don't know. I don't know why he killed Maggie, but obviously he brought her back from Edisto, supposedly to go see his father who was dying in the hospital, which they never did. But that was a dark moment in that trial when you explained how that shot went up. And I saw everybody gasp like, oh my God, he blew the head off his kid.
EB, we always talk about maintaining your composure. That's probably the only moment that I really got angry. I didn't show it, but when their experts can look at an injury like that, and as you mentioned earlier, you're advocating for the defense when you can actually make that gunshot wound 180 degrees different than what it was. I had never met Dr. Reimer at MUSC. I like her very much. This lady's done thousands and thousands of these
autopsies.
And she had it right. She had it right. And you just lose a lot of respect for another pathologist and for other people that will actually when I said, put that shirt away. Same way with this. Get off of the wound. But I found out actually later on, the original SLED crime scene unit, who did a great job. They bashed that little lady, Mindy. She did a great job. She's got attorneys and majors and captains and 3 or 4 agencies, firefighters, first responders. She was the lowest ranked person there. And she tried, like we talked about earlier, to keep the integrity of that scene, but she just couldn't. So she was the easiest one to throw under the bus.
It was horrible the way Harpootlian, I think he miscalculated. We live in a time period where people don't like it when you demean people gratuitously. And he asked Special Agent Worley, what's so special about you? Then the other woman, he said, oh, you threw the phone in the bag like a can of baked beans. And these are public servants coming out. Listen, Kenny, By the time they got there, it's 11:30 at night. They're driving from Columbia to Hampton.
I've done it many
And
times.
these people are doing this at night. They know it's going to be a high profile murder scene. It's frenetic. Alex has friends coming over, family, his law partners. It's just a very chaotic scene. And a lot of people want to be involved. They knew this was a big deal. So you're going to have the game wardens involved. You're going to have the sheriff department involved. You're going to have SLED involved. You're going to have first responders involved. Everybody wants to get their claim and fame. Everybody wants to get on the camera. Everybody wants to get their name in the report. And it created a fertile ground for Harpootlian to be able to attack the scene. But when you separate all the high weeds, you still come back to Alex. Alex, the video in the kennel with Cash the dog. You have the Snapchat with him and Paul with the tree that was leaning over, and he's got his blue shirt on and his khakis.
Right.
And you never can run away from evidence. As a defendant, evidence is evidence. The truth will always out, and you can comment about it. But that evidence was compelling, sir.
Yep. Yeah. And I also want to say, and I don't believe we've crossed this point, I had battle. I mean, I have the utmost respect for my adversaries, and no matter how you try to frame it as being independent, now when you look back at it, it was certainly adversarial. But I had the easy part. Like I said, I'm very good friends with a lot of those SLED agents. Ryan Neal now has retired and living in Kentucky. David Owen has retired. Those guys, they lived this, EB. They lived it 24 hours a day, those men and women for a year and a half. I was just really fortunate enough to be brought in at the end, the last 4 months. But I don't believe you can put a grade on what they did prior. Because they lived it.
Well, watching you at trial, as soon as I heard you open your mouth, I said, okay, this is a different kind of witness. This is somebody that's going to connect. And if you are testifying, you have to make that primacy connection with the jury. And the way you talked to the jury as an expert witness, you didn't talk at the jury. And there's a big difference with that. You get these highfalutin experts that talk at the jury to let them know, here's how smart I am. Well, you didn't do that. You talked about the basics of it, and you made a connection with ordinary people because you're an ordinary person. And so as your testimony evolved, I knew it was compelling. But then in the rebuttal, when you were put up again,
I was like, oh.
And then that's when you shined. I mean, you were put on the stage for a reason. And I mean, you were hitting 30 footers after 30 footers, 3-point shots that were just nothing but net. And then John Metters, who stumbled a lot during the trial because he has that old Columbo Matlock, take the glasses off, but it was preaching in the rebuttal. He was up at the pulpit, and I think you two cemented the case.
Thank you. Thank you.
I have a question around this.
Yes,
for
ma'am.
both of you. Eric, you obviously were a part of leading the charge with the financial things that were going on.
But I was also the advocate on TV and in the media for the prosecution because the defense had all their minions sprinkling out every day, whether it was Joe McCullough or a lot of the press that was all enamored with Harpootlian. I was one of the lone voices every night, whether it was Court TV or on Cuomo or other shows. I was one of the lone voices who was saying, guys, I understand the soil of South Carolina. I don't think you do, you national pundits, Garagos, and all the other people that I fought with, Dershowitz, every night. It's this basic. This is what is happening in this courtroom. You're looking at Harpootlian like, oh, he's the magic man. That's not where the magic's happening. The magic is happening from the witness stand, from guys like Kinsey. And, I think it was important that I played that role because there was no one playing that role.
Yeah, totally agree. When Here's my question around this for both of you. And I want to start with you, Dr. Kenny. The public becomes privy to all of this after you all on the inside, right? What was the moment for you when this was going on that you were like, oh, wow, this is beyond what we initially thought it was? That like CSI Dexter
Did
moment,
it happen
whatever
when
you
you
want to
were
call
at
it, because I feel
Moselle?
like there were so many.
Did it happen when you were at Moselle or before?
A combination, and I don't want to cross the wrong line, but a piece of evidence we talked about, like I said, not enough for me to go out on a limb, but you're like, wow, this is real. And seeing those actual pellet defects in that metal door, because Moselle, all of the inner walls had been ripped out. The feed room was absolutely empty when I got there. Seeing that window frame still there with the defect through the pane, and looking up and saying, wait a minute, I saw that defect in the original photos, and having to find shade because I was out there in broad daylight, get my computer set up, finding that defect. And once I found that defect, then I found 10 more. And I'm like, no. And then you can get an angle, and
You realize he shot up and shot his kid's brains out.
yes, sir. And then you're like, well, that's why you don't have more spatter, because you got the wall here and you're only going to get a little bit of it. And the second thing, that was evidence wise. Situational wise is when I pull up at a courthouse that I've been in many, many times, and you see the state fair there, everything except the rides. I swear the elephant ear booth was there. I mean, you look and I'm like, what have I gotten myself into? This is a real big deal. And you got to put on your big boy face and get out the vehicle and get in the courthouse and do what you're there for. But I don't like to back down from anything, but that is an intimidating moment.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yes, there's a perfect description of that energy.
It was.
What about you, EB?
Yeah, I totally agree. When I drove to Walterboro for the first day of the courthouse and I saw, like you said, the fair trucks and everything minus the Ferris wheel, and I see Nancy Grace and all the people from NBC that you see on TV every night, Aaron Burnett, and you're like, wow, this is going to be, a type of Susan Smith, a Casey Anthony type of trial. This wasn't regional. It became national, and like, hey man, I'm a part of it. It was really surreal. It's historical. And look, it's going to go down as the most famous trial in South Carolina history. We obviously have Pee Wee Gaskins, Susan Smith, who killed her kids, Dylan Roof. But I think Murdaugh is going to historically eclipse South Carolina. Look, it won the trial of 2023. 2023 was the most notoriously trial of the entire year. And there was a lot of Wall Street trials there. We have the Idaho shooting. We've had the Doomsday murders and stuff. But Murdaugh, there's something about the Low Country. There's something about the dynasty of the family. There's something about the South Carolinian and history. And there was the power and money and whatever. But it really was just surreal. And I pinched myself. I had a question yesterday on my Anything But Bland weekly update where somebody said, well, what would have happened to your life if you weren't part of Murdaugh? And I'm glad I was. I have had a great life. I have a wonderful wife, great kids. But I wouldn't say I was stale, but I was definitely in my fourth quarter cruising. And now this opened up so many different doors. It's opened up doors for you. You're now a nationally recognized forensic expert witness. You testified in Tennessee and other places. We've all made a name and made our bones off of Alex Murdaugh in a way. And going back to that crime scene in your testimony, when you testified that he got on one knee as Maggie was running away and shot her in the calf or from the back and then chased her down and then the execution shot. I mean, the darkness of your testimony
So dark.
was so, so powerful.
Well, we all agree. I agree 100% with everything you just said, EB. But you got to remember now, there's always been a big difference. Your wardrobe was much, much more than mine. I had 3 suits. You know, I had 3 suits during Murdaugh, and they told me, they said, "You're getting up here on this day. You're getting up here on this day. You're getting up here on this day." And I told Miss Carly,
I'm
I
out
said,
of clothes.
"If I don't get up tomorrow, you're taking me shopping, because I've got this rule. I don't wear the same suit twice in a week." And ended up getting up the next day. But it has definitely opened up avenues. And I'll be honest, I was in the 4th quarter and I was really, really cool with it. I was okay. I was already working, some little civil stuff, and my wife had already retired from Clemson. And I said, I'm just going to sit on the front porch. And if I can just make a little extra income to buy ammunition and maybe beer on the weekends in the bird field, I'm good with that. And it certainly opened up an avenue for my family. I'm most appreciative to have been a part of it, but I didn't plan it. It's one of them things you just can't plan. I was never going to be a TV celebrity. And I wanted to say this earlier, and
But you are now.
And my mind left me. I wanted to have an action figure, a Kinsey action figure, like G.I. Joe. Ended up with a baby doll, our mutual friend, Miss Stephanie
Truesdale.
Yes, sir. Love her to death, love her family. And you know what? I'm so proud of that. I don't believe an action figure would have given me the joy that has given me.
I have it in my office, me in my blue suit with the vulture pinion. And she gave me a stand. It stares at me in front of my desk, and I love it. And she made hats for Renee and me, and she made dogs for Coco and Stella. She's just an amazing person. And digressing, the generosity of people throughout this whole trial to me has been extraordinary. Casey Odell, which she sends me, Patty Dasher, decoupage stuff. I get so many crafts and just thoughtful things that people knit together. It's humbling. And I think I'd like to see you write a book. I'd like to see the book about a little bit about the science of crime scene investigation, but the homily of Alex Murdaugh. I think it would be very powerful. And so if you haven't thought of it, I think it's coming for you. I got to tell you. I mean, for me, it was cathartic to write the book, to put it down on what my life is. And whether 10 people read it or I sell 15 copies, I think it's important for my kids to teach their kids, hey, this is what I did. So I know that you're a busy man. I don't want to take up more of your time, but have you considered writing a book?
Well, let me say, I've never considered, I don't know if the world's ready for that, EB, but I will say something about yours. And I don't sit down and get a chance to read a lot of books anymore. It's always professional articles or searching for some research, doing some research for a case, but I couldn't put it down.
That's too kind.
And no, seriously, my wife will tell you, it did exactly what I believe a book is supposed to do. It makes you relate to your own experiences. And you and I, being from different ends of the world, I could not believe how many different things we had in common. The self-destruction mode in college, the not really wanting to be here mode. I never thought of removing tattoos, but definitely we would not follow that same path. But the athletics and everything. I think I was texting you, and I'm like, man, I can't believe this.
You were texting me as you were reading.
Do not realize, and that's what a book is supposed to do. It's supposed to make you reflect on some of your mistakes and some of your victories. And from minute one, our parents couldn't be any more different. I'm like, man, my mom would say the same thing, or my dad would do the same thing. You're like, we really, truly are more similar than we are different. And that book,
that's why I think that's the connection between us.
Yeah, the book just made me reflect on everything. And
just so the listeners know, you are an expert witness for me on one case, but you're on the other side advocating 100% different than my client's interest. And the respect that I have for you, it's not personal. We went toe to toe when I was cross-examining.
You took it easy on me, but anyhow.
You mopped the floor with me. But the point is, it's professional. It's not personal.
Yes, sir.
And
Yes, sir.
I have that high regard for you. Whitney, do you have any last question that you want to ask?
No, I just thank you so much for being here. You are just incredible at what you do.
Well, I think he's the treasure for our state. South Carolina is always underestimated. We don't wear shoes down here. We don't read the Wall Street Journal. I think Kenny Kinsey showed the world that we know our shit. We know how to communicate. We're credible and believable. We know how to put on a trial that's not a circus. There wasn't any rioting. Everybody was cordial with each other at the courthouse. Everybody treated everybody with respect, except that for the knucklehead that called in the bomb scare. But South Carolina looked really good to the nation on how we did this. Now, of course, post-trial with all the rigmarole about the jurors and the egg lady, that's out of our control. But you were a credit to our state, and I think you did more for our law bar than any lawyer could have done. So, Kenny, I thank you. I want you to have a good day. I think people are going to enjoy hearing from you like you gave us today. So thanks so much. I love you, brother.